qala, qeda, iqhude, iqhaleqhala, iqoleqoma, uxamo equcingo.
Anything is possible if you put your mind to it. Except for maybe these 5 languages, which are really, really, really hard. I know because I've learned one of them and you'll hear me speaking it later. But we'll start with this, coming in at number 5. Greek. Really? Why is it hard? Well, Greek is a Hellenic language. Have you heard of other Hellenic languages? No? Well, this is your first clue then. It's the only one of its kind, so you've probably never learned anything like it before.
Ελλάδα, η χώρα του φωτός. Βρίσκεται στο νοτιοανατολικό άκρο της Ευρώπης. Από την Ελλάδα προέρχονται όλοι οι σπουδαίοι φιλόσοφοι, όπως για παράδειγμα ο Πλάτωνας, ο Αριστοτέλης και ο Σωκράτης. Η Ελλάδα έχει δώσει τα φώτα της για την ανάπτυξη του παγκόσμιου πολιτισμού. Είναι ευρέως γνωστή για τα μνημεία της, όπως η Ακρόπολη και ο Παρθενώνας, για τα καταπληκτικά νησιά της, τις υπέροχες παραλίες της, τις παραδόσεις της, τους πολύ ευγενικούς και φιλόξενους ανθρώπους της, αλλά κυρίως για τα παντανόστιμα φαγητά της.
Beautiful. And you know, Greek is really ancient, even older than Latin and Chinese. It's mainly spoken in Greece and Cyprus, and it has the longest documented history of any living language. Pretty cool, huh? So here's the thing. Greek does have some easier aspects to it, but it also has lots of really weird, tricky things to wrap your head around. You probably already know that Greek has its own alphabet, that's an ancestor of our own English alphabet, but it's not just a whole new set of letters that you have to learn. Greek also has various intonations that make pronunciation difficult, and the grammar has some pretty unusual features. But let's start with the basic sounds. There are a few that don't even exist in English. Can you guess how to say these letters, for example? This letter is pronounced a bit like a French r. Not exactly, but kinda.
Έχουμε τη λέξη γαργαλιτό, γουργουρίζω, γρήγορα.
Although not when followed by these letters.
Γεύμα, γύρος, γη.
No, this letter is not a P. It sounds like the Spanish r, as in pero, ro, r.
Ρο. Η Ρένα ρεύτηκε ρομαντικά.
And this one here, well, it's not an X. It's something like the sound in Liechtenstein, or a nice raspy Arabic.
Οπότε έχουμε χάνω. Χρήμα. Χα.
So don't think you can get away with learning only the unusual looking letters, because Greek letters can be misleading, a little bit like false friends. Many of those that look familiar don't sound the way you think. And this letter has 2 forms depending on where it goes in the word. But that is nothing compared to Greek verb conjugation. Now, this is a lot more complex than English verbs, so the rules have to be learned from scratch. Greek is a highly inflected language, meaning that nouns and verbs can have many different word forms and endings. They change according to person, number, tense, mood, voice, and even the conjugation group they belong to. It can drive you crazy. Well, unless you love memorizing word endings, that is. Add to this 9 potential indefinite articles, 18 potential definite articles, and vocabulary, well, that's going to take some serious dedication. People tend to speak in idioms in Greece, quite a lot. And just when you've learned the right phrase for something, you go somewhere else and they have a completely different way of saying it. Any guesses what this means? And the word order can be tricky because although Greek is technically subject, verb, object, this rule is very flexible. But the real killer is listening and understanding what you hear. Because you see, Greek is spoken really fast with a mixed rhythm, and the letters have sound changes when they come at the edges of words. So catching the spelling for a word you only hear is next to impossible. If you're learning Greek with stories, for example, you're definitely going to need both the audio and the text. Lastly, there are some funny punctuation marks to get used to. So forget about this symbol in Greek. It doesn't exist. A Greek question mark looks like this. Wait, so how do they write a semicolon then? Well, like this, of course. And don't forget the quotation marks. So what do you think of Greek so far? Not so bad? Well, just wait, because things are about to get a lot badder, especially when you hear me speaking that really hard language later on. By the way, if you're new here, my name is Ollie Richards, and this channel is all about helping you learn a new language quickly using the power of story so you can become fluent faster and live your best life.
And then into engithandayo ngeZulu ukuthi sesi-influence ama-languages amaningi emhlabeni jikelele. Igama eliyi-one mhlampe engingalazi ufundi. Sometimes uzwa abantu bethi fashion fundi. Ufundi uphuma esiZulwini. Fundi usho ukuthi umuntu ofundayo. Mhlampe uma ufunda incwadi noma ufunda esikoleni noma ukhuluma ngento oyaziyo. Kuthiwa umfundi. Bese esiZulwini sinama-clicks amaningi. Iningi lawo sathola ku-language ekuthiwa isiXhosa siwusisi wesiZulu.
Zulu, or isiZulu, is the most widely spoken language in South Africa, Swaziland and Lesotho. That's at least 23 million people, and it's understood in these surrounding countries as well. So what's the biggest challenge with Zulu? Well, they speak with clicks, of course. Now, there are 3 different ones, and they're all made in different parts of the mouth.
Let us see. Our C, it sound like the name, Cela, Iquiqui, Itula, Triquilia, Colombia, Canada, Coca-Cola, letter X. Our X, it sound like the name, Oka, and we've got letter Q. Our Q, it sound like the name, Kala, Eda, Ikudem, Ikalakala, Ikolakoma.
Think you can handle that? Give it a try. What's more, there are variations of these depending on the surrounding letters, but this is really only the start of the complex system of consonants in Zulu. Try pronouncing these letters.
The letter P, it sounds like the name Ibaba, a letter H and L. H, L, it sounds like KL together. It sounds like Ikabishi, Ebula, Koku.
And there are plenty of other letter combinations as well that are voiced very differently from English. The Zulu language has close to 50 consonants and 7 vowels. But funnily enough, there is one letter that does not exist in Zulu. If you're keen to hear a full breakdown sometime, just let me know in the comments. But is it just consonant pronunciation that makes Zulu hard? No. Zulu is also a tonal language, and it isn't usually written with any tone markings either, so don't expect much help. A bit like these 2 words spelled in exactly the same way. This one means pastor, and this one means teacher. That's actually a very simple example. Tones can get pretty complicated. I found the numbers quite interesting too. Have a look at these number words. Why not pause the video and see if you can say them, because I'm certainly not going to do it. Doable if you go slowly, maybe? Right, now imagine you have to give someone your entire phone number. And no, you can't just switch to English either. Okay, enough vocabulary. Let's check out some Zulu grammar. Verbs are highly inflected, which means they change a lot. And there are 17 types of nouns compared to 8 in English. Also, the language is agglutinative, meaning that all kinds of prefixes and suffixes can be added to a word to create new words. So, for example, if you want to say, I haven't eaten yet, you'll combine different elements and get one single word. Or how about this one, meaning he owned 8 houses. Is it looking hard yet? Well, one thing that's not hard is hitting that like button if you've learned anything in this video, and it's even easier to subscribe to the channel too. Come on, give it a try, you'll see. Let's venture into the heart of Europe next, where this beast of a language lives. Most languages in Europe come from the Indo-European language root, but not Hungarian, which is a Finno-Ugric language. Hungarian is complex and unique, sounding nothing like its neighboring nations.
Azt tapasztaltam, hogy nem igazán tudnak az emberek sok mindent Koszovóról. Amikor így kérdezik, hogy akkor én mégis hol és honnan és hogyan, és mondom, hogy Pristina, akkor az első kérdés az, hogy az hol van. És amikor, hogy az Koszovóban, akkor mindenki ledöbben, hogy az veszélyes, és hogy ott nem is.
Incredible, right? Now, to get a better picture, let's check out the Hungarian alphabet. We start with the basic Latin alphabet. Then we pour in 5 vowels with an acute accent, followed by 2 letters with a double acute accent. Mix well with 2 letters with an umlaut. Sprinkle on top 8 letters made up of 2 characters, and decorate with 1 letter made up of 3 characters. That is the Hungarian alphabet cake, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, and in case you didn't spot it, the J and the LY are the exact same sound. Now, there are 14 vowel variations, and there's a thing called vowel harmony as well, which you also have to get right, of course. Yep, Hungarian is a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. All of these unique sounds make reading and pronunciation really, really tricky for English speakers. Grammar is also very different from English. For one, there is no he, she, it, the third person. There's only one neutral pronoun. So you have to figure out who the subject is by context alone. And as for the common nouns, well, Hungarian has a very elaborate case system with 35 cases or noun forms, although, of course, this number is disputed by different people. Now let's jump ahead to word building. I say building because this is another agglutinative language. I really could say this word all day long, agglutinative, because it's harder than normal because the word order is flexible and the longest word has 44 letters. I mean, come on. But the plot thickens. Hungarian is a very expressive language that relies on idioms more than other languages do. I'm not joking, there are so many idioms used in daily conversation that even if you know every word, you can still have no clue what was just said in that idiom. Still, it's not as hard as language number 1 on this list, which I'm sure you will not be able to guess, but that's coming up later. But not before number 2, which is so complex it was used during World War II as a code language and no enemy ever cracked it. I'm talking about the Navajo are a Native American people of the southwestern United States, and they call themselves Diné, meaning the people. Navajo is the most widely spoken North American indigenous language and an important heritage language with a rich history.
In the Nahuatl and Nidigin Nato at bed in the basic she nastol the basic she one up in a hal de ligi that could have been nasty that really
But it will not come easy because to begin with there are virtually no loanwords or cognates with English. That means that when you first have a go at reading it, there'll be absolutely nothing familiar looking jumping out the page at you. But Ollie, that's the Latin alphabet. Well, sure, that's really helpful until you realise that there are a bunch of consonants that we don't even use in English. You're looking at 33 consonants here, but Navajo needs them since it has a lot of sounds, including many that your English ears have never heard, like these ones.
Lid, kla, T/L, glottal stop. Is it?
This cool consonant sounds like you're blowing out a candle.
Ahwe.
And you've got to love a letter that's basically nothing more than a glottal stop. And that is, if you can say uh-oh, uh-oh. Can you say that? Try that. It's that sound in between the and the o. It's the stops right here. And it's the most common consonant in Navajo. We can hear it in the word butterfly.
K, glottal stop. Kalagi.
Now add to this the 12 vowel sounds. There are oral and nasal vowels, short and long vowels, and see all those accents above the letters? Well, they are tone markers because, yep, just like Thai or Mandarin, Navajo is tonal, meaning that pitch is important.
Yat-eh, but yat-eh, that means hello. Ah-heh-heh, you push at the end, ah-heh-heh, ah-heh-heh. Thank you.
Now, as for the little hooks underneath some letters, these represent nasal vowels. But now, here's something to get your attention. Navajo does not have adjectives. Wait, what? See, Navajo is verb-centered. So instead of using adjectives to give descriptions, they use more verbs. Just pile on the verbs. Can you imagine that? Try describing something using only nouns and verbs. Go on, I'll wait. See, Navajo has its own way of describing things. This one word, well, it means he enclosed himself by draping the entrance. Well, what's more, nouns are also really not that important in Navajo. A noun is often just a verb with prefixes and suffixes attached, and sometimes a noun can actually be an entire sentence. This means army tank, or literally a car that they sit up on top of that crawls around with a big thing with which an explosion is made. All of this makes it very difficult to translate directly from English to Navajo or the other way round. Another fascinating feature with Navajo grammar is animacy. Animacy expresses how alive a noun is, and there is a hierarchy. So humans and lightning are highest, children, as opposed to humans, and big animals kind of come next, and so on and so forth. So a sentence like, the bee stung the girl, is wrong because the girl ranks higher, therefore she must come first. The girl was stung by the bee. It's not even really about word order as such, it's more about power. Honestly, I could talk about this amazing language all day, but it's time for number 1 on our list, which is... If you thought Mandarin was intimidating, you haven't looked into Cantonese yet, because yes, Cantonese beats Mandarin hands down in terms of difficulty.
期咯，咁譬如好似嚟緊喺 New York 會去畢咗業之後可能會揾嘢做啦，咁但係我覺得如果周圍啲朋友唔喺身邊或者冇你熟悉嘅人喺身邊嘅話咧，咁對於我嚟講呢個地方就算係你已經 settle 咗喺度嘅話，都係冇歸屬感嘅。
Cantonese is spoken in Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Macau, Singapore, a few other places by around 60 million people. Now, it uses the same writing system as Mandarin, but the traditional kind used in Taiwan, not the simplified characters you'll find in mainland China. But although the writing system is the same, the pronunciation of those characters is different. So think like reading Chinese from Taiwan, but pronouncing it differently when you read it aloud. And then you're kind of heading in the right direction. Until, that is, you realize that when people speak to each other on the street, they have an entirely separate spoken form, which is essentially a whole other language. See, China has lots of dialects and languages, so they communicate important things using a standard written form of Chinese or Mandarin. But Cantonese, the spoken Cantonese, has evolved as a spoken colloquial dialect, a bit like street language, if you like, which is completely separate from Mandarin, and they are not mutually intelligible for the most part. So basically, imagine this. If you read aloud from a book, and then you say that exact same idea to your friend using spoken language, you will use completely different words. So there are basically like 2 languages in one. It's like learning Mandarin Chinese, but literally double. Your next challenge is the really daunting part of Cantonese, which is the tones. There are 6 basic tones, or is it 9? Well, it seems to depend on your definition of tones. There is a common saying in Cantonese, 搞聲落調, 9 sounds, 6 tones. And I heard of a professor of Chinese who said there are some Cantonese tones that only dogs can hear. And then there are the homonyms. Now think of the English words to, and to. They all sound the same, but they have different meanings. Cantonese has a massive amount of homonyms, you see. Here's an easy example. This means forest, and this means to pour. The pronunciation? Lam and lam. Can you hear? They have exactly the same tone. Now, Cantonese has a meaner still trick up its sleeve to separate the novices from the masters, and this is particles. Particles are a tricky business, and this can be really confusing, intimidating even. A particle is a function word added to the end of a sentence that changes the mood or the emotion that you want to convey. Like if someone asks, where are you going? Then they can add this particle at the end to soften the question. So to say, where are you going? 你去邊處啊? I'm going home. 我返屋企啊. That at the end, see how that's attached to the end? That's the difference between saying like, I'm going home, or I'm going home. That's how it's conveyed, and it's not easy. There are complicated unwritten rules about which particles can be combined and in what order they occur. I mean, a seemingly harmless final particle might be the difference between sounding funny, impatient, curious, miserable, passive-aggressive, or just plain rude. If any language requires immersion to really understand it, it is Cantonese, as I found out when I learnt it a few years back.
自從我決定學廣東話，同埋喺我個 blog upload 咗第一段廣東話 video， 已經有1年嘅時間。
But in spite of all the complexities, Cantonese is a wonderfully expressive language, and if I could learn it, well, so can you. And one of the best ways to learn a more difficult language is through stories, because there's too much to memorize in these hard languages. There's just too much. So stories can help you learn naturally and relieve the burden on your memory a little bit. So how to do it? Well, it is all laid out here in my story learning kit. It's completely free, and you're going to get a bunch of goodies that are going to show you how to start learning a language with stories, an important 6-step process you need to follow to do that, how to double your memory for new vocabulary from stories, and a helpful planning worksheet that you can print out to help you stay more consistent. It's all free, so just click the link over here to get started.